Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the Level Up Your Japa series. Today we are on the final part, which is part 3. We spoke in the first part about Japa as the foundation of our spiritual life, Lord Chaitanya's personal example, and the 3 stages of chanting. And then in part 2, we spoke about the role of sleep, and we talked about time management, personal time management. And in part 3 today, we're going to talk about dealing with distractions and the mode of goodness and beyond. So before we get started, I'm going to give you the opportunity to do the Japa assessment, the Japa self-assessment again. And just for those of you who may be just joining this series for the first time, if you haven't seen the other 2 parts, at the beginning of each session, we do a self-assessment. You're welcome to participate if you like. If not, you can just skip ahead to the first topic. For those of you who don't know, or for those of you who have been participating and want to be reminded of what the scale is, we have at the lowest end of the scale, at 0, we have that chanting japa is a burden that we do only out of duty, and we try to distract ourselves with other things while we chant. And then halfway up the scale, we have it's not always a burden. Sometimes I try to pay attention. And at the very top of the scale, we have my taste for japa knows no limits. I want to chant 24/7. So just somewhere on that scale, this is just for your own purpose to see if while you're going through these classes, you've tried to make some changes in your chanting to try to improve your quality of chanting, your level of attempting to chant attentively, and take note and just see as you go along where you're landing on that scale. And again, it's not to judge yourself, it's just to assess where you're at and to troubleshoot so you can see how you can improve. So just take a few minutes. You can pause the video and take a moment to reflect on where you think you might be at on this scale at this point. And again, if you're just joining us for the first time, you can go back, watch the other 2 videos if you like, and apply some of the techniques to your japa and do some assessments along the way. One other question to ask yourself as an overall assessment is, are my material desires decreasing? Because when we are attempting to chant attentively and to reconnect with Krishna, our material desires naturally decline, and our spiritual desires naturally increase. So it's another way we can assess ourselves, just overall in general. Okay, so first topic for today, dealing with distractions. So keep in mind that when we chant japa, we are trying to reconnect with Krishna. It's a personal endeavor. It's not a technical endeavor. There are some technicalities, doing things to try to make it easier for us to be attentive and so on. But really, in the end, it's about a personal connection. And if you can't be present with someone, you can't form a deep relationship. So we want to keep that in mind. Again, this is not a technicality. It's not that, let me see if I can get the mechanism of chanting correct, rather than let me see if I can be present so that I can form this deep relationship, or I should say repair this deep relationship that I have with Krishna. So remember in the other 2 classes, or if you weren't here in the other 2 classes, we talked about 3 types of pramada. And pramada is the root offense that makes the other offenses difficult to deal with. And so what is pramada? It's inattentiveness. So if we're not attentive when we're chanting, it makes it much more difficult to deal with the other 10 offenses that we're supposed to be avoiding when we chant. And remember, there's that verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that if one is infested with the 10 offenses in the chanting of the Hare Krishna maha mantra, despite their endeavor to chant the holy names for many births, they will not get love of Godhead, which is the ultimate goal of this chanting. And so we want to do whatever we can to reach the ultimate goal of chanting, which again is that reconnecting with Krishna, uncovering our loving relationship with Krishna. So if we know that inattentiveness makes the other offenses difficult, and the offenses altogether keep us from reaching that goal, we want to do something about it. So the 3 types of pramada. 1 was sleep, 2 is distraction, and 3 is lack of intensity or lack of interest or apathy. So we talked about sleep in the last class, and we're going to talk soon about the lack of intensity or lack of interest or apathy coming up. And right now we're going to talk about distraction, the second type of pramada. So I saw an interview recently with a man by the name of Johann Hari, and he wrote a book called Stolen Focus, and he's talking about all the distractions we have in our life and the effects that it has on our ability to focus. And so he described his definition of a flow state was deep, meaningful attention. So he gave 3 tips to get into, or what's required to get into a flow state or deep, meaningful attention. And of course, this can apply to our japa because that's what we want. We want to get into that state of deep, meaningful attention to Krishna because Krishna deserves it. Krishna deserves our deep, meaningful attention. So the 3 things he said that are required, one is you have to pick only one thing to focus on. So this goes back to all of our points about this attentiveness, right? We want to be attentive. The root offense is to be inattentive. And so you pick one thing to focus on. And that means when you chant your japa, there's only one thing you're focusing on, and that's Krishna, being attentive to Krishna. And then he said it has to be something meaningful to you. So of course, if we're chanting japa, we're chanting it because it has meaning for us. And if we start to feel like maybe it's not meaningful, we might want to check and see, is it because we're not reading Prabhupada's books, we're not reminding ourselves why we chant, what the purpose of chanting is, what the goal of our practice of Krishna consciousness is, and to remind ourselves how meaningful japa actually is. And then 3, it begins, I thought this was interesting, it begins at the edge of your abilities. You have to work a little harder each time. So let's say someone's learning how to do something. They don't pick the easiest form of it where they just say, I'm just going to, like, let's say they're learning an instrument. I'm not just going to play a tune that I know really well and that I'm really good at and just stop there. I'm going to try a new tune. I'm going to try to practice something new. And so applying this to japa, I can say, okay, it begins at the edge of my abilities. What have I been doing so far? Maybe I haven't even been trying to be attentive. So maybe the edge of my abilities means, and edge of your abilities means it's not beyond what you can do, but it's pushing you out of your comfort zone. And so you're doing the best that you can to be attentive. And when I see this, what he had said about working a little harder each time, that reminded me that, yes, every single day we chant japa, it's an opportunity to try a little harder, to work a little harder, to try to be more attentive, and to figure out what happened when we were unable to be attentive, right? So that's part of the work, is seeing this day I really had a difficult time trying to be attentive when I chant. What happened? Why was the other day easier and this day was more difficult? So that's part of the work, always going to the edge of your abilities, always trying to see what can I do to improve. And in that way, you can get into that flow state where you're trying to work on being attentive. And then he said that there's one thing that ruins flow, and that is being interrupted. So in this day and age, we have tons of things that interrupt us constantly in our life in general, what to speak of how it affects our japa. And, you know, this flow state, in a sense, Krishna does speak about this in the Bhagavad Gita when he talks about one-pointed intelligence. Now, he's speaking overall in someone's life and what path they choose, but it's the same principle. So he talks about vyavasayatmika buddhi, right? That one-pointed determination or one-pointed intelligence. And this is Bhagavad Gita 241. He says, those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So point being is that the intelligence works best focused on one thing at a time. And when it's trying to focus on a bunch of different things, it becomes irresolute, right? It's not resolute in purpose. It's just trying to dip into too many things. So Prabhupada says in the purport, a strong faith that by Krishna consciousness one will be elevated to the highest perfection of life is called Vyavasayatmika intelligence. So there's that strong faith. There's that, what Johan Hari talked about is it should be something meaningful. So when someone has that strong faith that by Krishna consciousness they'll be elevated to the highest perfection of life, that creates that meaning. And then having that single thing to focus on, and then trying to work hard to improve it each time that we do it. This will help us to get into a flow state in our japa. Okay, so Johan Hari, along with, he interviewed Earl Miller, who is an MIT professor and a world-renowned neuroscientist. They talked about the 4 effects of constant distraction. Now, I'm talking about this in relation to japa, but even these points are great takeaways for our life in general and how we reach our goals in life. So Prema Bhakti is our goal with japa, reconnecting with Krishna, reconnecting that loving relationship. That's our goal. And so these things can help us reach our goal, understanding these things. So the 4 effects of constant distraction. One is what he called the switch cost effect, which is that whenever you're switching between tasks constantly, because they say that multitasking just means switching between tasks rapidly. No one's really doing 2 things at once. They're switching back and forth. So he said that every time you do that, it requires your brain to refocus and reconfigure. And so your performance dips with whatever you're doing. And so let's say you're talking to somebody and you're listening to them and you get a text. You look at the text and then you think about the text, and then you have to get back to the conversation and think, okay, what were they saying? And let me try to refocus on what they were saying, and you have to put the other thing out of your mind. So it drains. It's very draining to keep doing that. It keeps shifting your focus. You're not able to stay on one thing for long periods of time. And then he had what's called the screw-up effect. It massively increases your error rate. So the example that he gave was, let's say you're doing your tax returns and you're switching back and forth between that and something else. You're more likely to make mistakes that you have to go back and fix later. And then he talked about the diminished memory effect. He said that switching back and forth between tasks rapidly decreases your ability to learn and translate your experiences into memories. So again, we did talk about this in our last session when we talked about sleep and japa, right? When you don't get enough sleep, it's very difficult to take your experiences and put the pieces of the puzzle together. So it seems that distractions are just as destructive as lack of sleep. Of course, it's not that we can always have throughout our day just one thing we focus on and nothing else ever happens and no one ever comes to talk to us. But as a lifestyle where we have our phone, where we have our computer, and we have people, and we have our things that we want to do, and we're trying to deal with it all together all at once, it can have these detrimental effects on our brain and our intelligence. And then 4, creativity drain. He said innovative thoughts stem from the brain, forming connections based on absorbed information, and distractions stifle this process. So again, we talked about this with the sleep, is that if we want to think of creative ways to spread Krishna consciousness, we need to stay focused. We need to get enough sleep, and we need to stay focused. And so these are the 4 effects of constant distraction. And of course, this is going to affect our ability to, those 3 points, to keep japa as a meaningful goal, to stay focused on one thing, and to stay on the edge of our ability, right? We may lose that motivation to do that because we may be tired, we may be drained, these constant distractions. Okay, so here's some points to consider. He had mentioned some things that I thought were very interesting. He said that attention is crucial for achieving goals and problem solving. He said, if your life is atrophied into 65-second and 3-minute chunks, how do you build a sense of where you want to go and who you want to be? It's a bigger picture. And so when he said it's atrophied into these 65-second and 3-minute chunks, what he means is that's about the amount of time before you get distracted by a text, an email, or, notifications or what have you. And so to have that constantly happening doesn't allow you to build that sense of where you want to go and who you want to be. And that again goes back to those points about a meaningful goal, right? We want japa, reconnecting with Krishna, practicing Krishna consciousness, sharing it with others. That's our goal. That's our service. And so even if we have a full-time job, it still is part of our service because we may support that goal in others. We may financially support it. We may come when we have a job and do service on the weekends, do service in the evenings, anything we can to support the mission. And so whether you are directly engaged in outreach or you're supporting the outreach, you want to keep in mind to stay motivated. What's your greater goal in life? Building a sense of where you want to go and who you want to be. So who do you want to be? Do you want to be someone who contributes to that mission in some way? Do you want to be somebody who's trying to make steady progress in your spiritual life? And so we need that time to process those thoughts and gather our determination and our motivation for that goal. He said that Professor Miller, this is the MIT professor, the neuroscientist, he said that studies show you can only think consciously about one thing at a time. So again, when he said when we think we're multitasking, we're really just switching rapidly back and forth between things that we're thinking consciously about one thing at a time. And then we switch it to something else, and then we switch it to something else, and then we switch it to something else. So it's not really doing two things at once. It's either kind of half paying attention to both things or paying attention to one at the expense of the other. Okay, and then he said, with constant distractions, your IQ drops to a level equivalent to someone who is stoned. So stoned means someone who has smoked marijuana and is high. And so when someone smokes, and this isn't a permanent thing, when he talks about these distractions, that your IQ levels drop. Your intelligence isn't able to deal with things as effectively as if you're focused on one thing at a time. Obviously, if you have a job or you're doing some service, there's going to be distractions, but I think he's really referring to this rapid switching, this looking at a text, going back to your work, looking at another text, going back to your work, looking at your email, that kind of rapid switching back and forth rather than a slowing down of, I do a chunk of work for a chunk of time and someone may come and say something. So they did a study where people were at work and they let them focus on their job without any interruptions. And then they took another group of people and they let them do their job with a lot of interruptions. And then they took an IQ test afterwards, and the IQ test results of the people who were constantly interrupted was 10 points lower. And so those constant distractions don't allow your intelligence to focus on the task, right? And so then the mind starts to take over and just gets distracted by everything. So that's japa, right? Japa means the intelligence controls the mind and keeps the mind from wandering. And so the intelligence has to stay sharp. And the way it stays sharp is by not trying to switch back and forth between a million tasks throughout the day, and also especially not while you're chanting japa. Okay, and when you get distracted, let's say you're in a flow state, when you get distracted, it takes you 23 minutes to get back to your original level of focus. So if you're really in the flow state and you get distracted by a text or an email, you read it, you think about it, you're going to switch back to what you were doing, let's say japa, takes 23 minutes to get back into that flow state. So it's kind of a massive waste of time. And we did talk about a schedule before. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, that you can get a lot more accomplished in a day. People think they get more done by multitasking, but actually when you schedule things out properly and you do things in the mode of goodness, you actually can get much more done much more effectively. Okay, so some points to consider. I thought they were very interesting. Then let's talk about what are the types of distractions. So I compiled a list. There may be more things I didn't think of. So some types of distractions: devices, obviously, people, sightseeing, intrusive thoughts, pleasant thoughts, neutral thoughts, driving, chores, etc. Fill in the blank with whatever else you think could be added to that list. So my question to you is something to think about before we go through these different types of distractions. My question to you is, what's your number one distraction? I know most people are probably going to say their devices, especially their phone. But for some people, they may have found a way to deal with that and they have other distractions. So I'd love to hear in the comments if you want to talk about what your number one distraction is and what you may be, why it's so distracting and what you may be trying to do to resolve it. Okay, so devices. Devices are always trying to get our attention one way or another. There's unlimited notification sounds from unlimited sources, and they're trying to become the center of our lives. A few tips about devices, and again, please share in the comments if you have other tips, if you found ways to deal with the distraction of your devices. Please share. So some things I thought of. One thing is schedule time for answering texts and emails. It's not true unless you're a manager or a leader in some way that has some time sensitive things. Sometimes, like for example, when I was managing Krishna lunch, when I was in Gainesville at the Krishna house, I did have to keep an eye on my phone sometimes because the cooks were cooking during Japa period. And so if they had any issues in the kitchen, I had to kind of at least be on call, which is a little difficult. Most of the time, nothing went wrong, so it was okay. But outside of that, if you don't need to be on call, then schedule different times of the day where you're going to sit down and just answer texts and emails and messages and whatever else you need to answer. Schedule it. They don't have to be answered the minute they come in. We sometimes, I think, mistakenly assume that the second a text comes in is the second it has to be answered, and it can make us feel anxious the more time that passes before we answer that text or that email or whatever it may be. So if you put aside a chunk of time, people will get used to it. They'll get used to seeing that when I text this person, they always get back to me. It's just not right away. They get back to me at such and such time of the day, typically. And so then they become accustomed to that, and then it relieves some of the anxiety that we may feel thinking, oh, they probably think I'm ignoring them or I'm never going to get back to them. But we've kind of created this frantic way of communicating with one another that things should be instant. Turn off your notification sounds at least while you're chanting japa, because even though we know logically that we don't have to answer text, there's something about that constant dinging that makes us feel anxious and like we have to answer to make the dinging stop. So just turn it off altogether. Turn off your ringtone, turn off your notification sounds, and put the phone somewhere else. And then it's something you don't have to think about. It doesn't make you feel compulsion to answer. And then utilize do not disturb mode. I love do not disturb mode. When I'm chanting japa, unless I know someone needs to get in touch with me for managerial reasons or for time sensitive reasons, I put my phone in do not disturb. And so what happens is even when so let's say your phone is not in do not disturb mode and you see texts coming in, even if you don't read them, it can still be distracting. Like, oh, someone texted, I wonder who it was. I wonder if they need something. I wonder if, I wonder what they're talking. And then it's already distracting you from your japa. Do not disturb mode, you don't even see it coming in. Then it's just you and Krishna. It actually opens up your world more. It opens up your space. Because when you have that phone always dragging your mind and your consciousness back to it, your space becomes very small. When you put it away and put it in do not disturb mode, it opens up your area, opens up your space, it opens up your mind and your intelligence to be able to say, I have a choice to pick what I'm going to focus on now, and I pick Krishna as the focus of my attention. So those are some things that I use to deal with the device distraction. Please share in the comments if you have any other methods that you use to deal with the distraction of your devices. Okay, people. People love to talk to you when you're chanting japa, right? Somehow, when you chant japa, if it's not during japa period, somehow you're not doing anything. You're just chanting, so they can come and talk to you. Or somehow a manager may feel like, okay, there's that person. It's hard to get in touch with people. I've got something I want to talk to them about. And now's the time. They're not doing anything, right? Japa means you're not doing anything. Somehow you're like a sitting duck when you chant japa. There's always that joke that the hardest place to chant your rounds is in a temple room, in a temple. During the day. During japa, generally people stay focused. There may be some things going on here and there, but in general, people tend to just stick to chanting their rounds. But during the day, if you have some rounds left, it's very challenging. And not just people coming and talking to you, but you getting distracted by maybe groups of people sitting over there talking and you can hear what they're saying. Let's say you're chanting too close, or you're just kind of, people watching. That can be very distracting. So some things, some tips for dealing with that distraction. So if someone does come up and talk to you while you're chanting, stop chanting. Don't chant, nodding and listening to them and just mumbling the japa, mumbling Krishna's names. You can only, again, we just learned that you can only focus on one thing at a time. It is absolutely impossible to hear what someone is saying and to pay attention to Krishna at the same time. Imagine two people talking at the same time and trying to hear each other. You may be able to mechanically say the words, but you're not paying attention. So you're either paying attention to your japa or you're paying attention to the person speaking to you. You can't be doing both simultaneously. It's absolutely impossible. Now, having said that, let's say you stop chanting, you listen to what they say, you can find a way to politely end the conversation as soon as possible. It doesn't have to be rude. Can't you see that I'm chanting? Why are you talking to me? You can just, some of the ways to end the conversation is just to say, thanks for letting me know. Maybe we can talk about it later because I'm chanting right now. It's kind of reminding somebody that chanting actually is an activity. It's not something that you do simultaneously with something else. And so find a way, and then people will get accustomed to this person doesn't do other things while they chant. They don't talk while they're chanting. Or at least if it's something time sensitive, they may come up to you and say, if you could give me 1 second, wait till you finish your mantra and then have the conversation and then you get back to your chanting. Even that's difficult. Often it's better to just go somewhere. If it's during the day, it's often better to just go somewhere else when people are around so that doesn't happen. And so, yeah, that's my next point. Avoid chanting around others who aren't chanting. You might go sit in a park and chant. You might go in your room. If you live in the ashram, you might go in your room. If you don't share a room with somebody, close the door, put a do not disturb sign, and just get your rounds chanted. Find ways that you're not around people who will be tempted to talk to you and who aren't distracting just in their conversations with others if you're sitting around them. So this goes back to the politely end the conversation, but you can also just in general politely convey to people that you're unavailable when you're chanting. Again, they'll get used to it. If you always engage with conversation when someone brings it up, especially if you keep chanting while they're talking, they're going to see that chanting really isn't an activity that you need to do alone and focused. you can actually have conversations while you're chanting, and you can actually, or you'll stop your chanting because it's not really that important. It's time to hang out and talk. You can tell them you're in a meeting with Krishna, right? No one's going to, if you tell somebody that you have a management meeting, for example, and you have a team of people sitting in a room having a management meeting, if you've ever been in one before and someone opens up the door, oh, sorry, they close the door and they leave. They see you're doing something. They see you're in the middle of something. So you can kind of convey that to people. I'm in the middle of a meeting with Krishna. So it would be equivalent. You might maybe don't want to, you don't want to offend anybody and say, can't you see I'm in a meeting with Krishna? But just to get that mood across, at least even in your own consciousness, your own intelligence is telling you that you're in a meeting with Krishna right now. It's not time to have other conversations. It would be rude. So even if you've at least convinced yourself of that you're not going to be talking to Krishna and listening to someone else at the same time, looking at someone, Krishna's over here, you're talking to Krishna and you're just totally listening to somebody else, it would be considered very rude. So we want to bring it back to that personal platform where we have a personal relationship with Krishna. Krishna is a person, and Krishna deserves the respect of being paid attention to properly, just like everybody else expects to be paid attention to properly, or thinks it's rude when we don't pay attention properly. It's the same. Krishna's a person. And of course, he's a supreme person, right? And we have left him. So it's even more important that we pay attention to him because we have decided to leave him. And we're trying to earn the relationship back. And so we want to really just pay attention to Krishna just for the sake of saying, I'm sorry I left. I'm here to try to fix the relationship. I'm going to give you all the attention that I can. So you're in a meeting with Krishna and just make it known to people that you're unavailable when you chant in a polite way. We don't want to make people feel bad. It's a habit. It's a bad habit that gets passed down from generation to generation, that people see it happening and they get accustomed to it. And so we want to kind of inspire them while we're conveying this message at the same time, that even in their own japa, they may feel inspired to do the same. We teach by example, and that includes being polite. Okay, sightseeing, going on a nature walk in the woods. You're looking at all the trees in the forest, and you're thinking how beautiful it is, and you wish maybe you brought your camera. Should you take a picture for Instagram? Definitely should have brought your camera. Okay. So the thing about sightseeing, the thing about appreciating nature while you're chanting, is that chanting is chanting only. It's focused, deep, meaningful attention on Krishna. Sightseeing is sightseeing only. And this actually goes back to how our lives are so distracted now. If you want to appreciate nature, take a walk whose only purpose is to go appreciate Krishna's creation, right? You're going on a walk, you're giving your brain that space to think about your experiences, to form memories, to form creative thoughts, and just walk without any distractions. I like to go through walks in the woods. I do not look at my phone while I'm walking. I try to just walk and appreciate Krishna's creation, think about different ways that I can improve my service, and just kind of be in that moment. And that's a separate thing than chanting. Chanting is just chanting. Sightseeing can be very distracting from our chanting. Even though we may be appreciating Krishna and how creative Krishna is and how beautiful his creation is, it's another form of thinking that's not just focused on hearing each of Krishna's names as we chant them. Okay, intrusive thoughts, pleasant thoughts, neutral thoughts, all kinds of thoughts, right? We're always thinking about all these things that people say to us, about all the things we need to do, about all the ways that we may feel like bad about our decisions in life or whatever. We have all these different types of thoughts in our mind. So some tips for dealing with our thoughts that come into our mind during japa that keep our mind wandering. So if you get an idea, or if you remember something that you needed to do that you don't want to forget, stop your chanting, put your bead bag down, get a piece of paper and write down whatever it is that you have to remember to do and you don't want to forget. Or if you come up with an idea that you want to do in your service, whatever the case may be, pause and write it down, get it removed from your mind. Because if you don't write it down, throughout your japa, you're going to be like, I can't forget to do that. I can't forget to do that. I can't forget to do that. I can't forget to, it's like that's all you're thinking about. I know I'm going to forget. I know I'm going to forget. So just stop and write it down. And that's it. Now you know you won't forget. You don't have to think about it anymore. So that's one tip. Another thing is make your schedule for the day the night before. And we talked about this in the previous class. Make your schedule the night before. It keeps the mind peaceful because what you're telling your mind is that I have put aside time for everything we need to do. And so I have a dedicated time for everything. And that also puts into your consciousness, I am dedicating these 2 hours or hour and a half, whatever it may be, I'm dedicating that to Krishna. And the other things that I have to do throughout the day, I don't have to think about that while I'm chanting because I've already scheduled it. And I know that I've fit it into my schedule in a realistic way, so I know I'm going to get to it. And so it can keep the mind peaceful knowing I'm dedicated to Krishna right now, and later I'll dedicate myself to the other things that I've already scheduled. Because sometimes what happens is we get overwhelmed. I have so much to do. How am I going to get through all of it? And while we're chanting, we're like, I have so much to do. I don't know how I'm going to get through all of it. But once you make that list of things you need to do, let's say even for the week, and then you say, okay, on Monday, I'm going to get this such and such thing done. On Tuesday, I'm going to get that done. And I'm going to get it done between these hours. Now the mind can be peaceful. The mind's not thinking about everything it has to do and being in a state of feeling overwhelmed. Everything has a dedicated time. It's compartmentalized, and now you know you're going to get to it. You know it fits into your week because you've made a schedule and you've seen that it fits. And that means typically being generous with your time. If you think something will take you 2 hours to do, schedule 3 hours. And that'll make the mind even more peaceful because you know you've given yourself that buffer, that it's not right on like, this is going to take me exactly 2 hours. I have to finish it in exactly 2 hours. I don't have time otherwise. You've given yourself a little buffer space. And then make a plan to deal with the root cause of troubling thoughts. Let's say you have a lot of intrusive thoughts, some bad feelings about yourself, some feelings of a sense of personal failure, a feeling of not having dealt with people properly. Make a plan outside of your japa to deal with those sorts of troubling thoughts. What is the cause of it? Who should I talk to? Should I schedule a therapy session? Should I schedule time with my mentor to talk about them? Because again, then you know like you're starting to work on those issues and they won't be quite as intrusive once you begin to work on them. Okay, driving. I hate to bring in morbid facts, but I'm going to. The number of people killed in the U.S. by distracted driving in 2022 was 3,308, and the number injured was 289,310. So I want to just throw that out there because distracted driving doesn't just mean being on the phone. It can be all sorts of things, and this is the National Highway Safety Association, something like that. That's the name of the group. It's something to that effect. And they talked about all different ways one could be distracted. Talking to someone, changing the radio, looking at a text, talking on the phone, so many things. So first and foremost, it's super dangerous. And again, we can only focus on one thing at a time. So if you're driving and you're trying to focus on Krishna's holy names and pay attention to the road, you're not going to be able to do both very well. Don't assume your road's always going to be free and clear. So you're going to do one at the expense of the other, or you're going to do both of them terribly. And that's very dangerous, and it's not conducive to attentive chanting. And this is what this MIT professor had said, that you can only think consciously about one thing at a time. They've done studies to show this. So if you're driving, you're thinking consciously about one thing at a time, or not giving enough attention to both things at the same time. Okay, chores. We all have done the one-handed, let me just do this thing while I'm chanting to get it done. And this is going to go back to making your schedule, right? If you make a schedule, you should be able to fit your chores in there. So even though you have a hand free, it doesn't mean you should be using it to do things, because again, you already are doing something. You're chanting and you're trying to give Krishna proper attention, not give attention to chores. So it goes back to the schedule. Troubleshoot why you don't have time to do your chores after chanting rather than during chanting. Why is it that you're running out of time? Is there something you could do in your schedule? Is there something that you can do in your life so that you're not trying to do too much in a day, so much so that you have to do some of it while you're chanting your rounds? So make a schedule the day before, or the week, make a schedule for the week. Assess your potential overload. See what's going on that leads you to doing those sorts of things, to doing the one-handed chant in one hand and chores in the other. Okay, so what other forms of distraction have you battled? Please share in the comments section and let us know what else that wasn't on the list have you had to battle when you're trying to chant your japa? Or if you haven't thought deeply about the fact that there's not quite the effort we should be making in being attentive, if you find yourself in that situation, moving forward, now that you're trying to chant more attentively, what forms of distractions are coming up besides the ones that we spoke about? Okay, so our second and final topic is the mode of goodness and beyond. So we're talking about going from sattva, which is the mode of goodness, to shuddha sattva, which is pure goodness, which is beyond the modes. Okay, so the modes are in Sanskrit called the gunas. And guna means rope. It also means quality, but it means rope. And the reason why it's called rope is because it's something that binds us or holds us down to this world. The three modes are tamas, which is ignorance or darkness, rajas, which is passion, and then sattva, which is transcendence contaminated by rajas and tamas, right? So that's sattva is shuddha sattva that has gotten some rajas and or tamas mixed in with it. And so there's really only two modes, rajas and tamas. And then sattva is those coming into shuddha sattva. It's contaminating shuddha sattva. And then we have shuddha sattva, which is transcendence, right? It's above the modes. And you can see when you read through the Bhagavatam and the Gita, it's always talking about going beyond the modes, because the modes, again, are that rope that binds us to this world. The modes means we are contaminated with the idea that we are the supreme enjoyers, that we are the center of reality. And so that's what that rajas and tamas is, creeping into shuddha sattva and creating sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the mode of goodness is the platform that we need to be on to go to shuddha sattva, right? We need to be in sattva to go to shuddha sattva. So let's really dissect that and figure out why that's the case. Let's talk about some of the qualities of the different modes. So let's say you want to chant, or you are chanting on the platform of tamas, or ignorance. And of course, we're talking about the pure form of these different modes. It's often mixed, very mixed. And so we may dip into these different modes at different times. So let's talk about why we have to chant from the platform of the mode of goodness rather than these other modes. So tamas is ignorance, it's darkness. In the Bhagavad Gita 18:35, Krishna describes, And that determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, and illusion, such unintelligent determination, O son of Pritha, is in the mode of darkness. So we can see the determination of one in ignorance can't go beyond dreaming, right? So how can you pick up your japa and chant if your determination can't go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, illusion, and so on, moroseness? If you can't go beyond that, well, that falls apart pretty quickly, right? That doesn't work. Okay, let's look at another description. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam 3:29-8. Devotional service executed by a person who is envious, proud, violent, and angry, and who is a separatist, is considered to be in the mode of darkness. So what Prabhupada describes in the purport as a separatist is somebody who has a goal in life separate from Krishna. He's not there to please Krishna. He's there to please himself. He has a separate goal from service to Krishna. So if you have a separate goal from Krishna or from connecting with Krishna, why would you chant japa to connect with Krishna if your goal is to be separate from Krishna? So that doesn't work. Then let's look at Srimad Bhagavatam 11:25-18. When one's higher awareness fails and finally disappears, and one is thus unable to concentrate his attention, his mind is ruined and manifests ignorance and depression. You should understand this situation to be the predominance of the mode of ignorance. So, okay, let's look at this. You're unable to concentrate your attention. If you are unable to do that, what is the purpose of chanting in that mode if you can't pay attention? Because we already know that inattentiveness is an offense and that Krishna doesn't reveal himself if we chant without trying to be attentive. And again, I'm stressing trying to be attentive because that attempt, when we make that attempt to be attentive, Krishna actually begins to reveal himself. We don't have to be perfect at it. We just have to at least try. And so if someone is unable to even concentrate his attention at all, well, that doesn't work either. So chanting on the platform of ignorance based on its descriptions doesn't work. So the question I have for you, and again, you can answer in the comments, what is your experience when you've tried to chant in the mode of ignorance? Let's say you've had one of those days, you're super tired, you're not in the mood, you feel like a little, we used to call it mode of iggy, when you're a little iggyed out. What is your experience when you've tried to chant in that consciousness or on that platform? Okay, so let's talk about rajas or passion. What about chanting on that platform? It's a little better than ignorance, but let's take a look at the description. So Bhagavad Gita 18:8, anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. And so you can see someone in passion, they give up their prescribed duties as troublesome. So if someone finds it difficult to try to be attentive while they chant, they may just give that up. And so it makes it very difficult to chant on this platform. Bodily discomfort could also be mental discomfort, right? I don't want to have to do this. Even bodily discomfort, I don't want to have to spend the energy. My mind is all over the place. I'm not even enjoying this, so just forget it and give it up. So that doesn't work. Then in Srimad Bhagavatam 3:29-9, the worship of deities is talking about devotional service. The worship of deities in the temple by a separatist, same thing again, as someone who has a separate goal than Krishna, right? They want to have separate interests other than Krishna. With a motive for material enjoyment, fame, and opulence is devotion in the mode of passion. So again, if you have that separatist mentality, if you're doing things just for material enjoyment, fame, and opulence, that's not really conducive to respectful chanting where you're attempting to be attentive to Krishna, because what you're really concerned with is your own material enjoyment, fame, and opulence. And of course, all of us have this to some extent, or else we wouldn't be here in this world. But we want to try to get off that platform because it's going to make it a lot more difficult to chant. So that doesn't work so well. And then in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:25-17, you should discern the mode of passion by its symptoms, the distortion of the intelligence because of too much activity, the inability of the perceiving senses to disentangle themselves from mundane objects, an unhealthy condition of the working physical organs, and this is the clincher, and the unsteady perplexity of the mind. So if you're all over the place, you're scattered, too much activity, you can't perceive things properly, even your physical organs aren't working so well, right? Like people get burnout, they overwork, they get sick. And then the unsteady perplexity of the mind, if your mind can't stay fixed, it's very, very difficult to chant on that platform. Your mind is all over the place. And if you're feeling sick, everyone knows how difficult it is to chant when you're sick, right? When you have the flu or something, oh my God, it's just, to get your rounds chanted is like the entire day. So that's why I always suggest to myself and others, try to get a taste for chanting when you're not sick, so that it's a lot easier to do it when you are sick. So that doesn't work either. That perplexity of the mind and unhealthy condition of the physical organs, that doesn't help with chanting. So same question again, what is your experience when you've tried to chant in the mode of passion? And again, please share in the comments, what do you experience? What happens? What makes it difficult? All right, so now chanting on the platform of sattva, the mode of goodness. So in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:25-16, it's described that when consciousness becomes clear and the senses are detached from matter, one experiences fearlessness within the material body and detachment from the material mind. You should understand this situation to be the predominance of the mode of goodness in which one has the opportunity to realize me. So two really important things here. Detachment from the material mind. The mind is the thing that wanders when you chant and doesn't give you the opportunity to realize Krishna if you can't control it, right? So the intelligence has to control the mind. And so if you have that detachment, the mind is more under control. And on this platform, Krishna says, one has the opportunity to realize me. So obviously, this is the platform on which we want to chant our japa. So that's a keeper. Then Bhagavad Gita 18:33, O son of Pritha, that determination which is unbreakable, which is sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, and which thus controls the activities of the mind, life, and senses, is determination in the mode of goodness. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Your determination is unbreakable. You are going to get up and chant your rounds, right? You feel that determination. That determination is sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, right? So yoga for us means connecting with Krishna through japa. And then it controls the activities of the mind. So again, you're getting the mind on board with chanting. The mind's not wandering as much. So this takes practice. So that's a keeper. And then Srimad Bhagavatam 11:25-10. Any person, whether man or woman, who worships me with loving devotion, offering his or her prescribed duties unto me without material attachment, is understood to be situated in goodness. So that's a keeper. So all of these descriptions of the mode of goodness just prove that this is the platform on which we should chant. So again, that question, what's your experience when you chant in the mode of goodness? And I'm sure a lot of us have chanted in all the different mixtures of the modes, and we've had different kinds of experience with it. And so what's your experience when you chant in the mode of goodness? Okay, so let's talk about rising to the mode of goodness, because now that we've established it's the best platform to chant on, how do we get there if we're not there already? So a few tips for rising to that mode of sattva or goodness. One is get regulated. We talked in the previous class about a schedule. We talked a little bit about it in this class. Get regulated, write out a schedule. Try to have a similar schedule every day if possible. And if it's not possible to have exactly the same schedule, come as close as you can. Do whatever you can to get somewhat regulated. Shower upon waking. I know I have to say it out loud. I'm sure that every devotee who's watching this is like, obviously I shower in the morning, but some people may have those days where they just think, it's not a big deal, I'll get to it later. But getting regulated and trying to get up early enough and showering in the morning, it really helps bring one obviously into the mode of goodness, because being clean and refreshed means that you're able to work with a more clean and clear consciousness. Okay, early to bed, early to rise. I know it's cliche, but it's true. And I know I've been saying it over and over again, but I can't stress it enough. It bears repeating. Go to bed early, get up early. That's the mode of goodness. That's going to help you. Anything after 9 o'clock at night typically leads you into the tumbling down the rabbit hole of a million things you could do online, right? Or sitting up talking with your friends till, early, even sometimes even early morning hours, right? Or watching a movie. When you start a movie at 9 o'clock, forget it. You're finished. You're going to be up. You're going to watch that. You're going to want to see something else. You're going to want to look up something else. So try to create a schedule where you can go to bed early. And then, of course, you're going to naturally wake up early and you're going to be awake. You're actually going to be awake when you wake up. You're not going to hate the morning. And when you chant, you're not going to fall asleep. Okay, keep your space clean and uncluttered, right? That's the mode of goodness, is cleanliness. When your space is cluttered, your mind is cluttered. And it's much more difficult for your intelligence to control your mind if your space is cluttered. So keep it clean and clutter-free. Cook and offer foods in the mode of goodness. There is a description, if you go to chapter 14, I believe it's in 14. The modes are spoken about in a few different chapters, but in one of the chapters where the modes are described, there are foods described in the different modes, and we should only offer foods that fit the description of the mode of goodness. That's obviously because the mode of goodness is practically, sattva is right next to Shuddha Sattva, right? You go from sattva, we just talked about, to Shuddha Sattva. So obviously the closest thing to purity is foods in the mode of goodness. And obviously Krishna is going to prefer foods that are in sattva, not in rajas or tamas. And when I say cook in the mode of goodness, I don't just mean cook foods that are in the mode of goodness. I mean cook in the mode of goodness. Have a plan, follow recipes if you don't know, if you don't have much experience. Get organized, keep your kitchen clean as you cook. Go into a kitchen that's already clean before you start cooking, and if it's not, clean it. Get your space clutter-free. Get your spices measured out in advance. Have everything ready for what you're doing, and then clean as you cook. So that's cooking, and then your consciousness goes into your cooking. And when you offer it to Krishna, you're offering him that consciousness. And any devotees who take those remnants, they're taking that consciousness. Of course, it's purified by Krishna. It becomes prasadam. But still, there's a reason why in temples, it's usually only the Brahmins that are supposed to cook, because they're considered to be situated in the mode of goodness, and their consciousness goes into the fire that cooks the food. So cook in the mode of goodness. Be aware of what you feed your consciousness. I know that the Hare Krishna world, not 100% of the Hare Krishna world is not going to give up watching TV shows and movies. Having said that, obviously we want to reduce it to a minimum. We want to keep increasing our spiritual activities and decreasing our material activities. But in the meantime, to get there and to get a taste for chanting, pick things that are more in the mode of goodness than in the mode of ignorance or passion. It really affects the consciousness. As entertaining as it might be, especially at night, you watch something in the mode of ignorance or passion, and it's going to pervade your consciousness when you go to sleep. And that's going to affect how you feel in the morning, especially towards getting up and doing spiritual activities. So just be careful what you feed your consciousness, what you read, what you watch, what you listen to for music, and so on. Okay, utilize the early morning hours for hearing and chanting. This goes back to early to bed, early to rise. The morning is the easiest time to get into that focused state. And it's the easiest time, if you're awake, if you've gotten proper sleep, to try to be attentive when you chant. And even reading Prabhupada's books, it's easier to do in the morning. If you can't, do the best you can later in the day. But if you're able to, try to utilize those early morning hours. Okay, practice tolerance, patience, and determination. There are so many opportunities in this modern age of Kali Yuga to practice patience and tolerance. Determination, we talked about, that's described, the mode of goodness, right? The mode of goodness means that you have a strong determination. So practice that. Practice getting yourself to do things that you don't feel like doing. So for example, I know here I'm in New England and it gets cold in the winter, and getting up in the morning it takes determination to get out of underneath the really warm, cozy blankets. So sometimes when I wake up, I just have to tell myself, don't think about it, just do it, and throw off the covers and just get up. So practice that determination. Practice tolerance and patience. Tolerance and patience doesn't mean to tolerate or be patient with abuse. It means situations that don't go exactly the way you want, or people not behaving exactly the way you'd like them to behave, to be patient and tolerant, to practice it in those situations. And it'll become easier the more you try to chant attentively. Okay, this is the same thing as be aware of what you feed your consciousness. Avoid closely associating with those heavily influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. We come to Krishna consciousness and we have friends maybe still outside of Krishna consciousness. We don't want to associate too closely in the sense that we take on their lifestyle. We may keep a connection with somebody where we're trying to give them in whatever way we can Krishna consciousness, and that just may mean bringing them prasadam, or it may just mean showing by example how to be a good person, right? How to be tolerant, patient, determined, and so on. But to spend too much time, to reveal the mind too much, it can actually affect the consciousness. And we may not notice it at first. It can be a bit insidious, where it just slowly does damage over time, and we start to take on their lifestyle a bit. Okay, approach others with understanding, compassion, and the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes when we have strong opinions, we approach somebody with the intention of imposing our opinion on them, or we may assume that someone doesn't have our best interests in mind, or is out to get us, right? We may assume that they did this thing because they are jerks, or they did it because they don't like me, or they did it, and it may just be a misunderstanding. So give people the benefit of the doubt. Try to understand them. And if, let's say, for example, somebody has a mentality that turns out to be unhealthy or narcissistic or abusive, okay, at least you've understood that you may keep your distance. But there may be people who just simply made a mistake. There may be somebody who misunderstood a situation. There may be somebody whose intentions are good, but it came out wrong. So if we approach people with the intent to try to understand them, give them the benefit of the doubt, and have some compassion for something they may be going through, that can keep us out of the mode of passion and in the mode of goodness. Okay, and if you have any other, again, share in the comments section. If you have other thoughts about a way to get to the mode of goodness that's not on our list, please share with the community and we can discuss. Okay, so when you rise to the mode of goodness, it combats those three types of pramada, that inattentiveness, right? So it combats sleep, distraction, and lack of intensity, lack of interest, apathy, right? So we can think about the different ways that it combats that. If you make a schedule to stay in the mode of goodness, well, you've combated sleep because you've scheduled to go to bed early. If you make a schedule where you go to bed early, It combats sleepiness. Why? Because you've gotten enough sleep now and you're actually awake. You've gone to bed early, you've gotten good quality sleep, and you rose early in the morning. You've maybe gotten exercise the day before. It helped you sleep better. So that combats sleep. Rising to the mode of goodness combats distraction. We talked about the different things that are distracting to us and how we can kind of set them aside and deal with them properly so that they're not interfering with our japa. And again, that schedule will help. It's one of the most powerful things actually, is making a proper schedule. That'll help you with your distractions because you're not thinking about all the things you need to do. You're not thinking, and especially, same thing, if you approach somebody with understanding and the benefit of the doubt, you're not distracted by those thoughts of like, why the hell did that person say that to me? Why do they think they should have done that to me? Why did they do that? Why? Those kind of thoughts aren't intrusive anymore because you've actually gone to the person with giving them the benefit of the doubt, and you've maybe had a conversation and actually worked it out. And so that just puts aside those thoughts, or it wipes them clear. And then that lack of intensity or lack of interest or apathy, well, if you're in the mode of goodness and you schedule time for reading Prabhupada's books, that takes care of that, right? Because reading Prabhupada's books is a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing, and it reminds us of our goal. Okay, so that's what the mode of goodness does for us, combating these three things that contribute to inattentiveness. Okay, so we talked about the mode of goodness and beyond. That's the topic that we're on right now. We need to go beyond the mode of goodness because it's still binding, right? Guna means rope. It's something that binds us to this world. And so Krishna talks about this in the Gita. Chapter 14, text 5. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So what does it mean to be conditioned? It means to be in a state of consciousness that makes us think that we belong in this world, that this world is a place for us, rather than thinking we don't belong here, we made a mistake, we took a wrong turn, we need to go back to Krishna, right? So we don't want to stay in the mode of goodness. We're only using the mode of goodness to come into a state of consciousness that allows us to realize Krishna, that allows us to approach Krishna properly, with the proper mentality, with the proper motivation. And then 14.6, O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. Okay, so again, become conditioned by. If you stay in the mode of goodness and you don't use it to go beyond into transcendence, into union with Krishna, then you stay bound to this world because of happiness and knowledge, right? So there's so many things you know about this world. It's so interesting, and you feel very happy. And what's wrong with staying here? Why not stay here? I actually enjoy it very much. We want to make sure we don't get stuck there. We're only coming to that platform to go beyond it. Okay, so Shuddha-sattva, transcendence. In the Bhagavatam 3:29-14, by attaining the highest platform of devotional service, as I have explained, one can overcome the influence of the three modes of material nature and be situated in the transcendental stage, as is the Lord. So this is the platform of devotional service. This is beyond the modes. This is Shuddha-sattva. This is transcendence. The transcendental stage means transcending the modes. And there's different types of transcendence. For us, transcendence means coming into union with Krishna and uncovering our pure love for Krishna, our original relationship with Krishna. And then in this Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila 2:11, in the purport, Prabhupada says, a pure devotee knows that when he chants the transcendental name Krishna, Sri Krishna is present as transcendental sound. He therefore chants with full respect and veneration. So I thought this was a great way to summarize exactly what we're doing when we chant, right? Krishna is present in that transcendental sound. It's not just words. And so this is a great reminder that this is a personal process, right? It's very personal. Krishna is a person. We have a very personal, loving, pure relationship with him. And so when we chant his names, we are reuniting with him. We are entering into that relationship again. And so it requires our full respect and veneration. So something to keep in mind. It's a great quote, very inspiring. It can help motivate us to try to chant attentively when we chant our japa. Okay, so overall summary from all of these classes, this three-part series of leveling up your japa. So proper sleep, right? We talked about sleep. Proper sleep is essential for attentive japa and maintaining physical and mental health. Managing your time efficiently helps you prioritize your japa, get enough rest, and accomplish other spiritual goals. Japa is the foundation of our spiritual life. It needs to be strong enough to support our practice. Lord Chaitanya taught by personal example how to identify and correct the problem. Right? If we don't have a taste for chanting, we want to identify that and then figure out why that is the case and then correct it. Now we have the power to do so. Then there are 3 stages of chanting, and you can skip Namaparad, which is the offensive stage, and then you can get unstuck from Bhajana Kriya. And if you haven't watched this one, actually these are a little out of order. This one was the first class, and the sleep and managing your time was the second class. So if you want to go back and watch and get more details or just kind of a refresher of these things, I'll have the link to those classes at the end of this video. And then identify, troubleshoot, and overcome your distractions, right? We talked about that today. And then rise to the mode of goodness to properly devote yourself to reconnecting with Krishna. So thank you all so much for joining me for these 3 sessions. Again, if you haven't seen the other ones, I'll provide the links here if you want to go back and watch them. And please share in the comments any thoughts you have about your practice of japa, any tips you might have, any experiences you might have that you think can help others in their practice. Also, I'll be including my email address. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or want to do some more troubleshooting with your japa. Thank you all again so much for joining me. Have a happy Krishna conscious rest of your day.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.